Hey, what's happening, y'all? Matt here with just a little vlog post. This month has been a little bit weird scheduling wise, and that last update video pretty short, so thought I'd just kind of jump on here and do a little extra video, kind of talking about some things, and something that I feel like is kind of appropriate for this time of year in particular is to talk about the stage name I use. So, and just kind of the story behind that. The stage name I go by is Matt Hellion, and seems kind of odd. If you've seen other content that I've put out, you've seen how Brandon and I have talked about, alcoholism and the negative effects of that. You've seen, but then you've seen other covers I've done, like mental health and things that are very party life oriented. And a lot of that might seem kind of confusing, especially you see the Matt Hellion stage name. I'm not big enough for anyone to really care. Just being completely honest there. But I thought it might be interesting to kind of talk about what happened there, what the story was that even led to us being here. So back in late high school, early college, when my friend Stephen Farber and I were jamming, I considered myself to be agnostic. I believed that there was something out there, that there was too much evidence of some sort of spiritual something or otherworldly things. I couldn't discount that there was something, but I didn't necessarily believe in any particular theology and wasn't practicing anything other than studying all the various religions, because I've always been very studious in that and the kind of person who sought answers to all these questions. So did a lot of reading on Taoism and Buddhism and Hinduism and all the isms, just because I found it very fascinating and interesting. So then when Steve and I were jamming, just making stupid songs, we did all sorts of weird stuff. We had one tune that we did where Steve did all these weird voices of like Cartman and Donald Duck and Chewbacca, and we did it like, Mystery Movie Theater 3000. We did it like that kind of style where there was music playing and then these characters were commenting on it and just ripping it to shreds. So we did some of that stuff. We did AC/DC covers, and we just wrote goofy, weird stuff, including a song about a guy named Tri Brother Marcos and how he came to have such bad gas. We were dumb kids just having fun, and it was a blast. I miss those days, and I've got plans for some comedy work in the future that I hope Steve can collaborate with me on, because we had a blast back then, and I would love to relive a little bit of that. I remember one tune that we kind of did this with, where we kind of created characters for ourselves. And I was the quiet, stoic, regal Hellion. And Steve was the vicious, ruler, conniving manipulator, and we called him the Cupcake of Death. And there were these two characters who were aliens and who were coming to take over the planet Earth with the power of their rock in this story. And there's a speaking character who's doing not necessarily lyrics, but speaking parts, who's played by Steve, who is the herald of the Hellion and the Cupcake of Death. And it was so goofy and weird, and we ended up boiling the herald's head in apple cider. We came up with weird stuff. I don't know what was going on in our heads, but it was goofy. It was great. We had a fun time. And probably spent way too much time watching Homestar Runner and Ask a Ninja and all those other goofy websites that were popular at the time. But anyway, that kind of introduced this character, and I guess I kind of embraced it and kind of took it into the Matt Hellion thing. And because I was agnostic, it didn't really conflict with any of my beliefs at the time. And being a metal musician, it lined up great. I also I used it on all my gaming profiles. So I am Matt underscore Hellion on PlayStation Network. I've got the same thing on Steam and Xbox, like all the different gaming profiles. I am the first, the original Matt Hellion, and I've had that lined up and locked in since I first started gaming online. And then I got older and went through some crises and discovered faith. And, I'm not going to lie, I've kind of wrestled with the stage name a little bit on whether it's appropriate for someone of belief. And at the end of the day, I've determined that, if I'm being completely honest, I think we kind of get hung up on little things like that a little bit too much, as opposed to what we're actually doing in this world to try and make a positive difference and to try to be a good example and to just try and put good positive things out there. When I look at just the name Matt Hellion, part of it is the convenience of the brand already being somewhat established. I mean, I already have a Google Knowledge panel. I already have domain names and all this stuff collated and collected and kind of set in stone. So it does seem weird to kind of abandon that. And so there's the practical nature of that. Kind of like my tattoos, right? These are reminders. These are going to be here for the rest of my life, and I'm proud of them. Even though there's some people of faith who would say that it's bad or evil or wrong or whatever, I don't buy that for 1 minute. And I've got this tattoo that's got two of my biggest influences at the time, AC/DC and Metallica, with rock and roll. And I've got this, which is the symbol that I designed for the first little name that Steve and I came up with for our two-man band, which is Aftermath, with Will Never Die. So rock and roll will never die. And it's a constant reminder of where I came from, where I'm trying to go, and what music means to me. I mean, the only tattoos I have are purely about music. That's a reminder of how much music, of how much creation, of how much art, all this stuff means to me. And I think Matt Hellion's the same thing. And it's also a reminder that no matter what your belief system, we all have a little Hellion inside of us. We all have a little bit of evil in there, a little bit of darkness, a little demon that we're trying to overcome and be better than. And it's important to remember that, especially if you're a believer in any sort of faith. We cannot afford to let the holier than thou stuff sink in. We can't. You end up pushing people away and isolating yourself and disconnecting from the real world that we're supposed to be making a positive difference in. Not a judgmental difference, not a condescending difference, but a real difference. I do that. I try to do that through my music. And I think that that's important to remember. And so Matt Hellion is partly that reminder. Another part of the name that I really latched onto is the idea not of a Hellion as a troublemaker, but as a rebel. And I've always seen myself as an outsider, an outlier. I've always been too rough around the edges for the holy, preppy Christian kids. I've never fit in that environment. Even whenever I was trying to, it just didn't. But I was also always too aware of the consequences of my action to fit in with the rule breakers. I've always been someone who was cut of a different cloth from everybody and did what I thought I needed to do when I thought I needed to do it. It got me in trouble sometimes because if I, like in school, if I thought an assignment was stupid, if I thought a teacher was being stupid, if I thought an assumption or a premise was false, I was not afraid to say so. I was not afraid to, if I had to write an essay that I thought was just filler work, I didn't have a problem making jokes inside the essay about how stupid I thought the whole assignment was. Some teachers were able to catch the humor in what I was doing and appreciated it. Others found it very insulting and condescending, and I got in a lot of trouble. Yeah, I was one of those kids. And so, I could kind of hang out with the skaters because I was a skater, but I skipped class and drove too fast and drank and smoked like the rest of them. Some lines I drew that I never felt like I fit in there. And still to this day, I don't feel like I fit in much of anywhere. I am always too much of one thing and not enough of another to fit into any given box. And for me, that I see as more rebellious than being rebellious for rebellion's sake, if that makes any sense at all. And so, yeah, like not being able to fit in with the cool kids, but not being able to fit in with the uncool kids, not being able to fit in with the rockers and the metalheads and the popular people, not being able to fit in with the potheads and the skaters and all the different cliques. Like none of that was for me. And so I developed a means of looking at my life and looking at the world around me rather analytically and making decisions based off of that and doing what I thought I needed to do and doing what I thought was right because I thought it was right. And a lot of people see that as too straight edge to qualify for Matt Hellion. And for me, that's not necessarily true. Matt Hellion is a stage name. It is a moniker. It is a character that I put on when I do a show. When you watch my music videos, you're watching Matt Hellion. When you are watching these vlogs, you're watching Matt Jones. It's a weird kind of dual personality situation. Matt Jones is very relatively eloquent and calm and steady and is a professional and tries his best to treat people with the utmost respect and tries his best to understand other people's views and opinions. Matt Hellion doesn't care. Matt Hellion's going to do what he thinks he needs to do when he thinks he needs to do it. He doesn't care if someone thinks he's right or wrong. And he's a different character. He is a part of me that when I'm struggling with an issue reminds me not to worry about what other people think, to not care if I'm going to rub someone the wrong way, if what I'm doing is what I think is right. So Matt Hellion is the weird little voice in the back of my head that when someone is disparaging about me or talks down about my career or what I'm trying to do or any of that stuff, he's the little voice in the back of my head that says screw him and reminds me to stay driven and tells me to show them and be successful anyway. So it's a weird thing. It is. And sometimes I wrestle with the practical aspects versus what the stage name means to me versus how it gets interpreted by other people. I have people that I've worked with on songs that are worship leaders and things of that nature, but they don't necessarily want to be attached to my brand because of the connotations along with that name and the judgment of the church people that they work for and with, which to me it's sad. And there's a lot of that stuff I don't agree with, and there's a lot of interpretations that I don't agree with. And part of my personality, part of who I am, part of that little voice is being the one who looks at things and reads independently and studies and learns and decides what I want to believe for myself based off of my understanding and my research, and trying my best to understand the context in which those words were written rather than what popular culture says we are to believe that they mean today. Part of that's driving me to investigate my faith even closer, to understand the context and the details of my faith even more, is Matt Hellion. It's that little voice saying, okay, but never take anyone's word at face value. Always do your own research, always do your own reading, always do your own interpretation. If you want to discuss and involve others and learn from each other, that is great, but never, ever, ever, especially on something that can't be scientifically proven, like matters of faith, take someone else's word as the whole truth. There are some things that are science. I grew up wanting to be a physicist. Whenever I was a little kid, I remember being in third grade and convincing my parents to buy me a copy of Albert Einstein's Special and General Theories of Relativity, and reading that cover to cover in third grade. Of course, I didn't understand most of it, except for like the very basic metaphors and examples that Einstein used. But that's the kind of personality I have, is analytical, scientific. I want to understand. I went from wanting to be a physicist to wanting to be a entomologist to a zoologist, and somehow I ended up on the music track. Matt Hellion is part of that voice that's always questioning and is always evaluating and understanding how things work and how things can be interpreted to mean one thing or another, and how fluid the written word actually is. So when I think about all that, and I think about setting aside my stage name for the sake of fitting in better with the church crowd, I don't think it's going to happen. That little voice kicks in and says, if they're the kind of people who would be so judgmental as to cast you out over a stage name that has a lot of history and meaning, just because they don't like the rebellious connotations in it, they're probably not the kind of people you need in your circle anyway. That's just a little discussion, a little rant about the origins of that stage name and the fun, innocent, goofy place it came from up to today and the greater meaning it has for my life, and why I keep using it despite some thoughts and statements that it should be otherwise. But that's all for this one. Thank you so much for staying tuned and checking this out and listening to my stories. If you've got any cool stories, I'd love to hear them. Jump on down into the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And, as always, I appreciate you. You're awesome. And have a good one.